Today, we're going to talk about a very old business that will probably be around for a long time, and that's coffee.
And I'm Matt
I'm
Garrity of
Brian Wood,
Matty G Digital.
and this is the Kawartha Small Business Podcast. We have business conversations for the Kawartha commute. This episode is sponsored by Starting Point Digital Marketing. Starting Point Digital Marketing exists because your business needs digital marketing. And if you're like many business owners, you're not even sure where to start. Starting Point Digital Marketing offers inexpensive marketing designed just for you. Check them out at startingpointdigitalmarketing.ca. All right, Matt. So we are going to talk about coffee today. You are a
Yeah,
coffee guy, right?
I honestly, as I get older, or I don't know how to say this, I don't love coffee as much as I used to be super honest with you. I think it's often a struggle to get really good coffee in your home. Maybe that's why. And like working from home, working remote, coffee, it's good. But I've worked at places where coffee is like a culture, which is kind of weird, like hockey culture, coffee culture. I think that's the name of a business down in Durham. And it can be a bit chaotic. I get the jitters with too much coffee. Like honestly, 2 to 3, I get like kind of jittery, a little bit anxious. Took some time to realize that what that was. If I have a coffee in the afternoon, I will be up later. I'm very affected by coffee and caffeine. So, but yes, I do love coffee. I'm talking a lot longer because we're on a podcast, and I'm sorry. The answer is yes, Brian. I love
Yeah,
coffee.
that's
Do you love
okay. Yeah,
coffee?
yes, I enjoy coffee very much. And what's coffee have to do with small business, you might ask? And I think coffee is one of the OG small businesses in terms of delivering it. I find coffee is interesting, both as talking about getting really good coffee in your home. So the quality of coffee varies widely. Preferences vary widely. What people like, are you lining up for Tim Hortons every morning for your extra large triple, or are you looking for, very unique blends somewhere? And all of that is, wrapped up
Yeah.
in businesses.
I've worked with like a couple different coffee companies in the past. I've worked for a roaster, so I actually like sell bags of beans, and I've worked with like a
Oh yeah.
cafe locally. The bag of beans one was pretty interesting. It was like very early on in Matty G Digital's career or business. And I learned like a good amount. I was doing social media for them, and I learned a good amount about coffee and like the history of coffee, which was very interesting. Do you know that they first realized the beans had like some sort of magic powers in them because goats were eating the leaves and they were just getting all hyped up and crazy? And then someone was like, "Oh,
I
cool,
did.
maybe we should drink or consume this ourselves."
I did know that, and it's funny. I wonder if it's one of those things that's like
Yeah,
true or just like the story that is told. But it is fascinating the history of coffee. We won't get too far off, but when you look at the history of the world, coffee is one of those commodities that's right at the center of it. You look at the horrors that have been happened because of coffee. Slavery specifically was set up for coffee over a hot drink in the morning. If you look at the world as we know it today, with Canada, the U.S., Europeans were looking for a faster route to China and Asia, for spices and like not necessarily coffee for that, but tea, and the morning beverage, and then coffee becomes another type of morning beverage. It's fascinating how just as a commodity, it's shaped the business world, and
it was
as
the
we see it
original
today.
like drug running. I suppose, if you think of it that way with caffeine.
Oh, yeah, really. And I don't, not necessarily caffeine, but just bit of caffeine, exotic flavors and tastes, a show of wealth. And it really still is. If you look at, I don't know if you've ever been to a museum that has like old spice cabinet that would have like a whole bunch of keys attached to it, and it would be like the highly secured room in the house. So if you were in the aristocracy, you would want to show off these spices that you have from around the world. And coffee very much would be like that, and it really still is. If I look at my own personal coffee habits, um, I always thought I
Mm.
didn't like coffee because I don't like the mass produced, sugar and cream filled coffee that does nothing for me. But I really like, trying different coffees from around the world and brewed different ways. And, in my cupboard at home, I have probably 3 or 4 different types of unique coffees now. So we sort of treasure them as assets. And, you know, I don't think it's a show off of huge wealth, but it's definitely, for me, it's not like, oh, look at this giant can I got for $3. It's like, oh, look at this unique one I ordered from this roaster
It's
that's,
almost a reflection of your personality, not wealth as much, but more so personality.
yeah,
Like, yeah, it used to be when I like first lived on my own. What's the biggest amount of coffee I can get for as cheap as humanly possible? And now I spend like almost $20 for a bag of I don't know how much coffee, but I gotta replace it. It's gonna make me sound like an aristocrat now, but like every other week I'm having to replace that bag.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, it's something we buy. It's moving across the world. Um, we've seen some changes to things like fair trade coffee. It's not so much built on slavery anymore. Still exists. There's still a very dark side to coffee, but there's also a huge small business side as well. If you look at from the origins of tea and coffee and hot beverages, there hasn't always been giant global chains sort of controlling that. It's the local coffee shops. Again, it's hard to get great coffee in your home sometimes, so you need places that have the proper equipment to,
Well, we talk about
make it
this all the
properly.
time where like we need a who for your coffee. We're like, yeah, I can make coffee and it's good and I can taste the difference between a $20 bag or like a nice bag from El Salvador where you're grinding it yourself or something like that versus something pre-ground in a tin. I can taste that difference. But I know that there are experts out there and there are people that do this literally all the time. And there's some that do it better than others. The more they do it, the more experience they have. You need a who for your coffee. Like, and the who's are the ones that provide the better coffee. That's why we like going out for coffee more than staying in, really.
Yeah, so it becomes a whole experience. So you can look at it, and again, coffee is a great example just of the concept of a core strategy as well. Are you cost based? Are you looking like a Tim Hortons, high volume, low cost, right? They don't really care about the quality of their coffee, except for they want it to be consistent. So they take all the beans they can get and basically they burn them till all the flavors gone in the same, right? But that's their strategy. That's what they're going for. Um, but if you're looking for that coffee experience, you want to go to a nice cafe that has an interesting vibe. The coffee has to match that. So you can't be like, oh, here's your, you know, triple, extra large that doesn't really taste like anything. Like it's going to be something unique, um, and curated and made properly. So you design your business around what your strategy is with that
Yeah, and I
coffee.
think you're seeing so many. innovative drinks coming out in the coffee industry or business as well. And I think I know what your feelings are about Starbucks, but like you have to give them credit because they probably were the ones that started that sort of innovation from a coffee perspective where you're seeing so many different types of lattes and different like drinks like that, cold drinks, cold brew stuff now where that's really like it is a business, it's a marketing decision. It's you see a lot of the cafes locally, Boiling Over, North Ward Coffee, they're big on a lot of these specialty drinks, and like that's what probably drives a lot of business or like sparks people's interest. Like, and I've gone in there to both of those places and literally just shown my phone and been like, hey, I don't know what you called this, but I saw this on here the other day and I would like this. I've done that
Oh
twice
yeah.
at both of those locations this year.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know, and I think that's a great example of just, again, for a small business, the innovation aspect of playing with something. Coffee is, hugely versatile. I know from learning different things, it has more like flavor tannins or whatever they're called than wine does. And like wine is a worldwide industry where, the terroir matters, like where it's growing, what the weather conditions are, who made it. Like there's all these aspects that go into it. And coffee is the same. Like that's kind of why I love it. Like how you prepare it, how it's roasted, where it's from, the season is why I love sort of the coffee culture and why I don't like the Tim Hortons, Starbucks, let's make everything taste the same with, bulk roasting. But it's just fascinating. Like there's almost endless opportunities and creativity. So, locally, those small businesses, again, we get back to like, it's an old business sort of peddling beverages to people, right? I just think that's fascinating to me. But how everyone's different and even batch to batch is different. Creating the different drinks, how you advertise those. They're great because they can, you show the picture on your
Yeah.
phone. I don't know what this is called, but show me this. Like it's a good example of you don't need to overthink your marketing. Like take a picture of the thing you made and put it out there, and
Yeah.
people
I
show up
actually
for it.
think the more I'm thinking about this, and maybe I should prepare more for our podcast, maybe not. But the more I'm actually thinking, like there are a lot of things that are very relevant with coffee and business. So we've talked a lot on this podcast about culture, cancel culture, bro culture, hustle culture being big ones. There is definitely a coffee culture, and there's three things I think that kind of like are important for business. One of which I already mentioned, where like I where have you ever worked where coffee wasn't a thing that people were talking about every couple hours? Do you want to go for a coffee? Want to go for a coffee break? I'm having a coffee. Do you want more coffee? It's like a thing that kind of binds that culture of your colleagues together. The second of which being it's like a huge driver for business meetings where it's like, hey, I need to talk to someone about something. I need advice. I'm going to pitch them. I just need to blow off some steam. Do you want to go for a coffee? Do you want to sit down for a coffee? It's a massive driver for meetings.
Oh
And
yeah.
then the last thing I was just thinking about, and I feel like it's slipping my mind, but the last thing is I have lost it. Darn it. But the coffee meeting thing is interesting because I I like coffee meetings, but also at the same time I dislike them because they can often take way too long, in my opinion. Especially because I'm not a fast coffee drinker. I have what people had described as wimpy mouth syndrome. So it takes me like 15 to 20 minutes to be able to take a sip of coffee. Like I can't have it right out of like a pot, like when it's poured. So I can't like even start my coffee to end my coffee meeting for like 15 or 20
Yeah.
minutes. So like I'm in a coffee meeting for at least an hour, which is probably too long in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think that's fascinating because you've touched on part of culture is ceremony. Part of culture is artifacts. So when you look at that ceremony of the coffee meeting and the culture of that, again, there's so many ways of how you can show what that means, right? Are you um, standing in the park with styrofoam cups of coffee, guzzling it down? Are you sitting with someone, getting to know them? I think we've talked before, one of your big strengths in businesses and your core abilities is that development of relationship. So I think, I mean, I would challenge you to embrace that it takes you an hour to drink a coffee and then choose those
Sure.
meetings carefully, because for you, it's not just a quick coffee meeting, it's about the relationship. I don't know if you've read the book called Three Cups of Tea, but it's about a guy who built schools in Pakistan in the mountains, and because he had got lost on a mountain climbing trip, almost died, was basically saved by a village. But in the culture there, they talked about, 3 cups of tea over 3 occasions, and by the third cup, your family. So, like, that process and, coffee is very similar. So, you know, to me, being able to come have a coffee with you for an hour at a nice coffee shop out of nice cups would be a sign of an important relationship. It's not a quick disposable meeting. Whereas I think some people see it as that. It's like, oh, let's have a quick coffee meeting, like 5 minutes, um, you know, really quick, maybe not that important, but they're maybe looking to push you for a quick sale or something like that. So in a way, it's like the medium is the message, depending
Yeah.
on how you
We
view
could
that.
talk a bit more about tea. We should honestly save that for a different podcast. But the third thing,
Is Brian spill the tea? It's the
yeah,
whole other
the third thing
podcast
I was thinking of that slipped my
concept.
mind. It's similar to number two, with it being like a meeting spot, or like, hey, let's go for a coffee to discuss business. Coffee shops, I want to, at least locally, but probably universally, or like in big cities, they're hubs for business and community locally.
Oh
So,
yeah,
again, like pointing out Boiling Over, specifically downtown Lindsay, it's like the meeting spot. It's the place to be for a business meeting.
yeah.
Like, you work remotely, or even you have an office. You're like, I just want to get out of the office. Let's go meet at the coffee shop, discuss business there. I want to work there for the day. I need somewhere like to focus and all that kind of stuff. I've done that in Bob Cajun before at the, I know it's called El Patio. I don't know if they still call it the Kawartha Coffee.
I think it's
Yeah, and
Kawartha
they've got
Coffee
like the big
Company.
patio outside. I think that's their big like push. Uh, it's a great spot. It's very fun. It's really cool. Like a fantastic place to be. But again, like I planned my whole day around that. I was like, I'm going to go to Bob Cajun for the day. I'm going to work on that patio, and I'm going to drink coffee like all day. I'm going to leave. I'm going to go for lunch somewhere. I'm going to walk around. Then I'm going to come back there and hang out. Like, it is fascinating the way coffee is like a massive cultural thing that we probably even take for granted. When you actually, now that we've had this conversation, I was
Oh
like
yeah,
thinking
it's
about it
a
more. Like, it's a huge cultural thing on like those three levels.
it's a thread that ties the economy together, the history of economy, how business works now, how your strategy works. So even from the coffee business, what's cool about it is a lot of, I don't know the stats, I didn't look it up, but let's say a massive percentage of people will drink coffee every day, right? Keurig is big because of it. The in-home Nespresso is a different one. They have a strategy. People who sell instant coffee again is a strategy. Um, if I'm setting up a business, breakfast places, people go out for breakfast and have coffee. If I'm selling coffee, I need to know, like, am I serving, what is that I'm doing? Is it the place for people to come grab their cheap coffee, high volume? Are people coming to gather as a community things? The old men
Yeah.
sitting out in front of the coffee shop in the morning. It's a thing that's always going to happen. I know I used to be relationship manager for a lot of agriculture businesses with the bank, and there was a few coffee shops you would just go at that time to run into your clients and talk to them because you knew that's where they were going to be at that time. Do you want to be that hub for business and the place to do that? Is your quality of coffee match that? Do your prices match that? I think, in a perfect world, you'd charge a premium for that, right? Like, how about you get, a piece of every deal that's transacted in our space? That's maybe a whole other conversation, but it's just fascinating, how you set that up. And
I wonder how it came to be. I wonder how coffee became this force and this cultural type of thing.
I would say, I mean, I don't know for sure. My sort of educated guess would be, would start out as a wealthy aristocratic thing, and then, that would incentivize traders to go get more of it, bring it to more people. The other element is who is coffee for, and it's such a commodity now, where different forms of coffee are for everyone. People love to attack the, millennials and their $5 lattes or whatever as they're, squandering their wealth, which is a whole other rant for another day. But there's also the cheap coffee, which is sort of the, quote unquote, working man's or working person's coffee. And it reminds me of, I read an article from, I think it was the early 1900s out of Toronto, and they were complaining about the price of coffee going up by like 2 cents or something, because it was, people would stop for a coffee in a diner on their way to like the streetcar to, go to their factory job in, Toronto and the neighborhoods. And they wanted it to be affordable for like the everyday person to be able to have coffee. And that's the sort of accessible, class sort of thing, right? So, being able to do that and have that part of the morning culture of going to work and stuff.
Yeah, and coffee drives so much of what we do, like commercially, financially. I'm just thinking about like you go on a road trip or you're going maybe anywhere and you're like, I'm going to stop for a coffee on the way. Or every Saturday now we go to the Lindsay Farmers Market downtown there, and we've been stopping at Boiling Over first and like grab a coffee, walk through the market, or grab a coffee, walk up and down Kent Street, grab a coffee in Fenelon. Like me and you got together in Fenelon, probably, I forget, like a year ago now at SIP, another fantastic place. That was the start of that business meeting and that business day. Peterborough, like, have we met at Silver Bean? Or like I've spent a day down in Peterborough too, where it's like I start at Silver Bean and have a coffee there. And it's always like the start of what you're about to do. It's a good tagline.
Yeah, it's that part of that culture. Yeah, the event. And again, from a marketing standpoint, that's kind of some neat language that's popping into my head now about what that is you're starting. Is it a fun day, right? Is it I'm a drone and I'm going through the drive through because I can't stand my job? Or is it I'm excited about the day, so I'm going to have a coffee? One of my absolute favorite things to do when I stay in a hotel is find, like, I call it looking for like the hipster coffee shop. And sometimes I'm disappointed and can't find like good coffee near a hotel I'm staying at. But like the best thing is getting up in the early, going and finding like really good coffee, having that in the morning. Like, yeah, it's part of those great days. This is when I first in high school discovered Tim Hortons and their at the time it was their cappuccinos. My friends and I like were just getting our licenses, and we weren't huge into drinking right away as teenagers. We would like drive around and get cappuccinos, and we used to talk about the smell of it when you opened up. I always got the English toffee, and other guy got like French vanilla. But the smell, we'd be like, oh, it's like a blast of good times. Like you get that smell memory, and I think coffee sort of embodies that.
Yeah,
for other
we
things
honestly
as
come up
well.
with so many good slogans. Like a sip of good times, the start of a good day, the start of anything. We've had some good ones. We should start a coffee company.
Yeah, yeah, I know we should maybe. It's yeah, like a lot goes into that, and a lot of what that strategy is. But I guess one of the as we get close to the end of our commute here, and people are probably pulling in for a
Or
coffee
finishing their coffee,
somewhere
yeah.
after listening to this. But just like all the different strategies you could have around coffee, and also just knowing like there's going to be a need for that and a need for those businesses because a lot of people drink it. Not one person can serve everyone. Tim Hortons has tried, and I don't think they've created a market for it, but there's always going to be lots of nuances, lots of ways to niche, lots of ways to really focus, your coffee
Mhm.
business if that's what you want to do. All right. Any
I
final
always say no and
thoughts?
then I say something else afterwards, but actually no today.
All right, awesome. Well, if you would like to have a coffee with Matt and Brian, we would love to do that. So send us an email at setitup@kawarthasmallbusinesspodcast.ca.